and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, board members, it's time for comments. We'll start down there. Good evening, sir.
I know this has been a challenge for everyone involved, and I'm just so proud of the central office and Mr. Nichols and all the school board members and teachers and all the staff that have endured over the last 2.5 months to make this happen. And I, like everyone else, will look forward excitedly to the day where we're all together and we're not wearing masks and showing our poker face in front of everyone that we come in contact with on a daily basis. So I'm excited about the future and look forward to the opportunities that we have before us in the weeks to come.
I just want to share my appreciation for really everybody on the team. Basically you're building a plane in the air. We're having to invent the future with so many unknowns, and I think the ability of the team to pull together is remarkable.
I echo what Ms. Barber and Mr. Mead have said in general. Specifically, I think I wanted to take just a moment to thank the guidance department at Kent High School and College Career and Life Readiness. I know scholarships have been awarded. Students have been interviewing, receiving scholarships. It's been nice to read those updates to make sure that those students get what they work hard to achieve over their career. And I even know from the College Career and Life Readiness, I believe we have 23 rising juniors that started in the Early College Academy program today. So they're taking summer classes through RCC, which is a huge number, a huge accomplishment. I'm sure we'll be hearing more specifics about that over the next few weeks, but I just wanted to highlight those couple points today. Thank you.
Ms. Daskell. Any comments?
You're muted.
You might be muted. Oh.
There she is up there. She's still muted.
All right. If you have something to add later, let us know. We're going to keep moving.
I'm here. It wasn't letting me unmute. Now I got it. Thanks.
Okay. Any comments before we move on?
No, I just think the team is doing an exceptional job. So I really appreciate everybody's hard work.
Great, thank you. Mr. Nichols.
This is our last school board meeting before schools are officially closed. Just want to say thank you to our family, community, and students. We couldn't do this without you. We have a great team that's working on this. We miss you. We couldn't do this without you. We can't wait to see you again. We do have an exciting end of the year celebration for our staff to thank them. We're doing a drive-through cookout. Don't worry, we won't be cooking while we're driving, so drive through and get there. Anyway, also we're excited next week. This has been a time of invention. The class of 2020 didn't end the way they would like it to, but we've been able to do so many cool things that we haven't done with any other class, from yard signs to the Facebook initiative that went wild and every senior was adopted, to postcards, to next week we're doing individual graduations. So every day next week from I believe 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. we're going to be graduating students. So make sure you sign up if you haven't. Make sure you get that done, seniors. We look forward to doing that ceremony with you. We'll have lots of different opportunities and picture stations, and we're repainting the New Kent Rock for the occasion. So class of 2020 strong. So look forward to that next week.
Great, thank you very much. Board members, you've had the opportunity to review the minutes, the bills and payroll, the monthly financials, and the superintendent's recommendations regarding personnel matters. Are there any questions? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move the consent agenda.
And do I hear a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. That is going to carry us. There are no citizen comments. So we are excited to hear about the Return to Learn Committee update.
All right, Dr. Bishop's going to join me for this presentation. Should have something coming to the screen for you. All right, so we're expecting an announcement from the state in the next few days about what a return to school could look like. Very proud of the New Kent team. They started about 6 weeks ago, really thinking about school reopening and doing a working group in several different categories. Dr. Bishop and his team have really been working through the process. Right now, we have a lot of questions and a lot of considerations. What we'll do is we'll pair this information with some information we got from CDC as far as CDC guidelines, with our CARES Act funding and our requests that we're working through with CARES Act, and then with the Virginia's recommendations. So I feel like New Kent is in a really good place as far as our next steps, because so much of the groundwork has been done. So whatever the scenarios are that we're given from the state, we're ready to go down all of those roads, and a lot of work is going on behind the scenes. You're going to hear a general overview tonight, because there are still more questions and answers. When we come back on the 15th, we should have guidance from the state of Virginia, so we'll begin to narrow that to a degree, and then we'll have a special session just specifically on school reopening, where you can hear from some of the leads and really get into depth on it. But we wanted you to hear tonight really just a general update and a sort of a committee report out from each of the groups. So Dr. Bishop, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols, I appreciate it. One of the things that the 112 people actually got together in 6 different committees. We wanted to make sure that even though we don't have all the answers, that we're looking at really specific considerations. One being equity, and that all of our students have a place in our educational system and have access to our education. So always at the forefront. We knew that there was uncertainty, that we couldn't wait for guidance. We had to make sure that we're asking all the questions for New Kent, that we're thinking things deeply, so that when we have the guidance, we know what that means for New Kent and specifically. We wanted to build community, foreseeing what our community needed, and then also bringing a lot of people on board so that they can have a sense of value and a sense of purpose on how we are going to make our schools look next year. Looking at professional development, because we can't do this without looking at how we're training staff, how we're training students as well, and training administrators. Looking at communication, continuing that idea of branching out. So even though we have members of these committees, these 112 members, all those people were reaching out to their fellow members as well. So it was not just 112 people on a committee. We were working with a lot of other teachers and staff. Just collaboration across school divisions. So we're reaching out to Henrico, we're reaching out to Chesterfield, we're reaching out to Roanoke, we're looking at Ohio, what they have to offer. And then making sure that we're aligning our resources. And Brian has really made us try to pinpoint like what it really means for New Kent. So that is really what has been on our mind as we're going through this process. So the background, we have 6 committees. We're going to hear from, I led one committee, Mr. Miller led another committee, Dr. Pollard led another committee, and we have 3 other community leaders as well. So you're going to hear from me with 2 committees, and then Mr. Miller will talk about other 2 committees, and so will Dr. Pollard. So from summer learning to school scheduling and calendar, the social and emotional learning, to curriculum and how that works. We've already done a lot of good work in preparing for this. It's not just sitting back and asking questions. We're actually doing the work to figure out how we can pivot very quickly based upon the guidance. Remote learning, that's virtual learning, and also health, safety, and nutrition, which is kind of underlines that whole thing. All 6 of these committees, it's like a gear, so we have to communicate with each other. Everyone has to interact and ask questions. We have Google Forms where I can ask a question for another committee and that committee can respond. So it's been a very good, based on, this unfortunate situation, we've learned a lot about teaching and learning and about each other. So, just a short slide. What we know, is that schools, we know that schools look different. What we don't know is how that's going to look. So just a big kind of an idea of how that is. Since March 13th, we've learned a lot of lessons, and we have thought about possibly how we could do it different, and also the things that we have done that were successful, how we can translate that into better instruction down the road. So the next on the agenda is Dr. Pollack. You want to see the ceremony.
So the committee that I led was a summer learning committee, and we met twice. And we tried to look at some of the summer activities that we always had and then look at some possibilities. Extended school year is for students with disabilities who meet the criteria. We typically start that program in late June. But we still don't know if we're going to be allowed to be back in the buildings. That would be the best option in terms of providing the services that the students need. If we are allowed back in the buildings, then we would probably not start that program until July to give the custodians and things enough time to clean and do training and things like that. Parks and Rec, we've been working quite a bit with Ms. Turner, who's on the committee as well. She's going to be having summer daycare for essential workers. So we've been kind of looking at how we can collaborate, even if we're not in the buildings, the school division still would like to help with that. In previous years, Mrs. Hathaway and I believe Ms. Gregory have sponsored a summer reading camp for 5th through 8th grade. If we're not back in the buildings, we are going to try to do that virtually so that the kids can still have that. Watkins is looking at having a book buddy program this summer. We also talked about remediation for students who maybe did not get a chance to finish some of their modules and packets that were sent home, or the virtual learning maybe was not as successful for some students for various reasons. And then the high school program typically is for credit recovery for those kids who maybe didn't pass the SOLs, which we're not having this summer, but they're looking at maybe providing that service for students who still need that help with finishing their assignments and things. So we have a lot of questions, and the biggest one is, I like what Ms. Barber said, this is like we're building a plane while it's in the air. How are we gonna provide the services? And a lot of that hinges upon whether or not we can be back in the buildings. One of the options for extended school year would be to provide a virtual platform for all students. That might not be the best thing, so option C would be provide some virtual for the kids who may be successful with that format, and then provide extended school year in the fall. If that makes sense, maybe after school and on some Saturdays. Health and safety is always at the forefront. We typically do not have school nurses and those kinds of staff members on site in the summer, but if we're in school, we would have to have that. Transportation, providing distancing on the bus. I think Mr. Hens has already counted the seats and trying to figure out how that would work. So the other thing we talked about too was if we do have a remediation program, even if it's virtual, how would we identify the students and ensure that they have the devices and things that they need to take advantage of that instruction? And the same for the high school. So it sounds like we have more questions than answers, but I think once the state makes a decision, the government makes a decision about whether we can have the buildings reopen this summer, we'll be ready to roll, because we already have some preliminary plans in place.
As, look at how scheduling impacts, our summer learning, we're also looking at how the schedule will impact next year, looking at how class size, social distancing will, make it, important to look at all different options. Could be an A day, B day, could be A week, B week. Could it be virtual? Could we give opportunities for students to do virtual learning and provide them with instruction? So all of those options were on the table, and when the committee met, we met 2 times, we'll meet again, either at the end of this week or next week, based upon the guidance to figure out like what really does this mean to us. So all of those had, there's negative consequences and then there's positive things that come from both. An impact on learning, transportation, food service, also impact on social emotional learning. And Dr. Powell will get more into that because it's really important to communicate what we're doing. And really looking at all of our students and how we can make sure that whatever schedule we put into place for New Kent, that it will meet all of our students an equitable schedule. So that is really kind of what we tossed around. Conversations were pretty deep and pretty very granular because we really talked about really specific things, actually some specific students and specific needs, because we also have students with fragile health concerns. So we want to make sure that we tend to those. So that was scheduled.
So, the social emotional well-being committee, the lead for that was Sandy Ward, who is one of our psychologists. And of course, the concern here is for some of the traumatic experiences that our children and some of our staff members as well may have had dealing with the situation. We know that our children are going to come back to school in a totally different culture. And so that's going to take some adjustments. A lot of times that change, especially in rules of engagement for kids, could impact them on the psychological and the social level. And so these are some of the considerations that the committee came up with. You may have heard a lot about trauma-informed practices. We're going to do more PD in that area for the teachers and the staff. And looking at the mental health and self-care for our students and staff. On the question side, I just want to mention, I was going to see if I can find it. So the second bullet, we talk about how do we integrate SEL, which is social emotional learning, into daily curriculum and support the social emotional needs of teachers. So I would kind of like to include all staff members with that, and I think that's important for all of us. We need to have a systematic approach and not just do a one-time workshop on how we can support our students and the community. One of the things that Dr. Ward did share with me by email was an assessment. I think it was 10 questions for kids to fill out to find out what they've experienced, how they're doing, how did they respond to the packets and or virtual learning, and kind of figuring out where they are when they come back and what they've been through. And then based on the data from the needs assessment, to be able to put some support in place for them. The big thing is, in my vision as well as the committee, is that planning ahead of time and letting kids and the parents and the community know this is what to expect when school opens. And that way they'll know what we have in place to keep them safe. And I think that's important for our students, but also for our staff.
Thank you.
So the next committee is the curriculum committee. This is headed up by some of our coordinators, Dana Gong, math coordinator, Jody Bailey, literacy coordinator, and Lisa Lalonde. And they have a very large committee as they're looking at all the content that we teach and having take a look at it from a variety of different ways. The first thing that, one of the things we did right after March 13th is start surveying teachers on what did you not get to? What content was missed? And so that we could start there with looking at how do we get kids up and what content needs to be reintegrated into next year. So then on their committee, they divided it up into teams, and those teams are looking at our pacing guides and looking at how do they need to address the pacing to get that content back folded in. So we got to backfill all of that was lost. They looked at it also from a standpoint of what's going to be caught up later anyway. So what are we already going to see that we're going to hit, because it's just part of the curriculum for future years. So they can really focus on what does the student need now to get them to the content that they're going to come to. So then with that, one of the things that they've done that we had for literacy and we had for math, but we never had for science and social studies, was a complete division-wide pacing guide and curriculum guide that showed everything that we do, every bit of content, the order it goes in, and then what resources do we have to then support the teacher in that. So that's what this committee has been doing a lot of, is developing these curriculum guides for the division and putting a lot of time on it. They also, with this, have been exploring resources, because across the board, it's not just, okay, well, here's the SOLs, protected SOLs. It's also what literature do we have that supports those science and social studies SOLs? So how can we connect those in so that we're getting cross-curricular work? We know that we're not going to be able to fit all the missing content in for science in science class. And same thing with social studies and content, the skills for math and English. So we're going to have to integrate a lot of that. So looking at how can we do those cross-curricular things by identifying the content, the resources that exist across content areas that work together. So they're also looking at, they do have some representatives from fine arts and elective classes in there, because we know that also that their content is important, but then also they can really support as well. And so they've been working with the content teachers on how do I integrate math into choir and music and in PE? How can we get cross-curricular across everything we do? And so that's, the committee's looked a lot at that and been working on making that, it's not just discussions, it's like feet on the ground doing things with that. So then, so some of the questions they've been dealing with is like, how do teachers need prep for what does instruction look like now? How do they evaluate students if we're coming back in a virtual environment and we're not in a classroom? So how are they doing assessments, both remote as well as here, and both typical assessments, but also performance assessment? How do you do an assessment and look at performance virtually? And so having some of those discussions, fair and equitable practices across delivery of content, but then also the grading. How do we provide, this has been one of the big questions, how do we provide interventions in this remote setting? And the tier 3, which would be your most intensive interventions and special education, how are we providing for those students and making sure they're getting those interventions they need? Then, as far as electives, so how can they be adjusted? Again, like I said, to integrate some of that content over. And then professional development, how are we preparing our teachers for all of this? What professional development do they need for both the remote instruction, but then also this cross-curricular instruction that they're now doing? What PD do they need to know to do that? And then the vertical planning, this is something that they really want now, especially as we're looking at missed content here, we got to pick it up here. So we need to have some vertical discussions of grade 3 talking grade 4, talking grade 5. That's what I mean by vertical, is having those discussions up and down the grade so that we all know what was missed, and what's covered later, or how can we fit it in. So that's the curriculum committee doing a lot of great work, and it's not just going to benefit us here, but all these curriculum guides, everything will have these benefits for a long time. So then committee I've been working with is remote learning. Again, another large committee. We broke our work up into these 5 areas that were key areas for us to be looking at. First and foremost, equity and access. Here in Newtet, we had taken a look at a broadband study the county had done last year, the year before, and it was about At most 70% of the public has high-speed internet. And so when you know that at least 30% of your population doesn't have high-speed internet, how do you deliver equitable internet-based instruction? And so we were talking, had a lot of discussion on that, spent a lot of our early time on that one. Communication and the need for having just very clear, consistent communication and regular communication coming in, and making sure that communication is going out on a regular basis and is clear for everyone. Then digital content, we do have certain content that we already purchased and we already use. So we've been looking at, is that content still important? Which parts of it do we need to keep? What do we not have that we need to get? And making sure that we're covered across the board there. Then learning platforms, we currently have 3 different platforms that we use from K through 12. With our 1-1 program, 6 through 12, we use Schoology. Then at 3 to 5, we use Google Classroom. K1 and 2, we use a program called Seesaw. And really discussion around, do we need 3 platforms or do we need a platform that is consistent? And or at least drill it down to 2, one that's appropriate for K1 and 2, and then from 3 to 12 have one program platform that everybody knows, everybody's on, parents know it, the kids know it, and so that we've had a lot of discussion there. And then what professional development do teachers need to be prepared for that? So we've talked through a couple different scenarios as far as what do we need to do for students to get them access. So how do we expand Wi-Fi access to students? What can we get Wi-Fi into their homes? Can we get it into their areas? Can we provide space in the schools that's safe for them to come into the schools and work here and just to get access to Wi-Fi? So talk through some of those things. And then communication, a lot of discussion on, just like learning platforms, having a common communication platform that every class uses, every teacher uses, every building uses, that works. Right now we have teachers who are using like Class Dojo, Class Tag, all these different programs. Like, can we just have one program that everybody knows that's what it goes through? So we're looking at that. How do we standardize that? Having a standard learning platform with not just one program, but then also consistency across classes. So the classes are organized the same way. So when a student goes from this class to this class, they're going to see the same organizational structure. And they'll have to learn a different organizational structure by which class they're in. Then what digital content is needed, not needed, I talked about that. And then PD for teachers, parents, and students. So what sort of training and professional development do we need to be providing to make sure that the teachers know how to work it, the students know how to access it and engage with it, and the parents know how to follow along with their student and communicate with their student and their teacher about what they're learning. So that's what remote learning is going to look at. You did have one of our committee people raising their hand during this, Jody Bailey, who is on the curriculum committee, because I was just going to allow her to. Jody, can you hear us? Or can you talk now?
I can hear you. Sorry. It was in my. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I heard you say my name, but my daughter was talking to me. So could you say your question again? I'm sorry.
You would raise your hand, so I'm assuming you would wanted to share something about your curriculum committee?
That must have been like from my pocket. That was not a legit hand raise. I'm sorry.
Okay. No worries. It's okay. So the next committee is.
Do you want us to wait and hold our questions, or do you want us to ask this?
However you'd like to do it.
Yeah, I already like to do it.
So, I wonder, and this might not be the right category, but under remote learning, are we also looking at communication with legislators and representatives, and businesses, like Verizon?
So we have talked about as far as communication with businesses in regards to Wi-Fi. And we are already reaching out we have several Wi-Fi buses that we're putting out in the community, but then we're also working with our CARES Act funds and some of our applications there to increase that beyond just the few that we have. And so, yeah, we're reaching out there as far, we haven't talked as much about the legislative. And I am just, in my role, I'm reaching out through the directors of technology for this across the state. We have a group, and they're working with legislators. We're working with the, one of the people with BDO, and she's talking with them. So,
And this is a constant topic at every monthly meeting I have with the county, Mr. Hathaway, as far as what do we need to do, what do we need to get rid of, you know, what are the next steps? Are we trying to access the broadband piece, or is it the cellular piece? Is it both at the same time, so we come together, and then, you know, who's doing what?
Okay. I think Rob Whitman is having a virtual town hall meeting coming up. Fireside chat is what he's referring to it. And it would just, and it's with the FCC. So anyway, I feel like we need to continue to push that, because I kind of feel like we're rural communities, the buck stops with the school system. We need online. And then the other part I would ask would be that 73% that you indicated reportedly has internet service. Was that clear in that survey so that it didn't include cell phones?
We're getting ready to do
so
our.
we're doing our own survey.
Okay.
It's getting ready to go out to help us plan for that.
Okay.
And we'll get to, do you have internet, is it
Cable, DSL, cell phone.
cell phone? So we'll get it, yesterday, 7%, we'll have the breakdown.
Perfect.
Awesome.
And we'll be able to, the way that's gonna work is gonna be tied back to the parent's contact phone number. And so we'll be able to tie back to area, map it out, and see where we're at.
Okay.
And then that'll help us figure out additional buses and Wi-Fi spots.
Yep.
Short-term solutions to make virtual learning a little better.
Thank you so much. That's it.
Were there any other-
Thank you.
okay.
The last committee of the working group was health, safety, and nutrition. So that was really about how you're gonna disinfect and sanitize, and how you're gonna organize your nurse's office, how you're gonna organize your classroom, how you're gonna teach students the new normal. All these health considerations, how are you gonna deliver lunches? Leslie was on this committee as well. How does that impact our school nutrition services? How do we train teachers or students to social distance? So looking at all these different ideas, and really trying to be flexible based upon the new guidelines, like how are we gonna quickly disinfect, how are we gonna monitor illnesses, do thermometer readings of students as they enter the bus. How long does that take for the bus route to increase? What's the attendance policy going to look like? And considering that for students, staff, and families, and implementing all these different schedules, and looking at the new compromised students as well. And just looking at just the reality of it, and then also like the professional development and training that we need. Just the health practices and also what resources we need to return to school. So we just had a CARES Act and we're trying to order some things in order to make sure that our schools are healthy and safe. And all this kind of goes back to how are we going to provide social emotional wellness to the students, and how this also goes back to the schedule. The social distancing goes back to the schedule. So all of these committees are all together working as one, as a working group.
You know, just one comment on that. I think this would go back to Dr. Pollard as well, with the emotional and then what you just said. I think the real challenge we have is especially at the elementary school level, when you look at the K through 2, because just the education piece of it is that and I'll just use my grandchildren for example, they're trained to the point up to now, anybody who has a mask on, there's something wrong with you. So emotionally, how do you flip that with that whole population to say it's okay? How do you re-educate them? And same with the social distancing. I mean, we're fooling ourselves if we think that you're gonna teach K-5 students to social distance.
Part of the guidance is like to make sure that the students know what a day would look like throughout, before they get there. Like, what does that,
Right.
when your teachers were and ask, you're going to be sitting we may need to bring students through so they understand what this looks like before they actually sit down at that desk with.
Yeah, and I think that's the huge challenge, like I heard from a parent that registered their kindergarten, and this was her complaint. If I can't visit the school before school starts and walk my child through, I'm not letting my kid start school. Why? My kid has no idea where anything is, and as a parent, I don't either. And so you want me and my child to start as a kindergartner, not knowing where they're going, where their classroom is gonna be, me as a parent, being able to sit down and meet with those teachers. And so how long is that going to take so that parents have an emotional well-being to say, this is a good place for my child to start school? And I think that's where I see the biggest deficiency is of us trying to educate them, of giving them their comfort level. And because our window is really short right now. It's not like we have 6 months to figure this out.
Right.
We have less than 2 months to figure it out. And then we gotta be pretty confident this is gonna work.
Well, but I mean, I think there are people, and I'll just use Code RVA as an example. They have had years of practice with cross-curricular virtual learning. There are other schools out there that can provide a lot of support. The other part of it is, I mean, it's not like you are building the plane in the air, but you've got examples of things that other people have done while you're building. It's not a blank slate. So a couple of things, I was just sitting here and I was going, parents could go through a virtual walkthrough. It could really be fun. You could even do like a scavenger hunt virtually. PTOs online, relationship building, like having an opportunity. What I'm hearing from across the state from teachers who really feel like they're missing something is that relationship building with their kids. I mean, sometimes that's why teachers become teachers, is they like that relationship with kids. So finding ways to be able to do that. But on a positive note, I just think there are programs that have had practice at that. And you guys are looking at that and using those as examples and saying, how can we make that better, right? I mean.
And then, to your point, Mr. Meady, I think typically a normal year, a student on kindergarten registration, we'd have kindergarten readiness camp right after school lets up. And then we would have an open house right before school starts. Those are those two key times that we provide that. We're still going to be looking at how can we provide something before school comes back. The hope is we'll be able to open up the building, even if it's, okay, we're only looking at kindergarten, and we're gonna bring you in at 4 or 5 at a time. And we're gonna take like a week and a half to do it, and bring you in and just walk the building. But we're gonna look at all that, how can we at least get them in the building? Yeah, it's a very good point. We definitely need to give for that comfort level for kindergarten parents and students as well. We do need that. Thank you.
So our next steps, continue collaboration with the committees, looking at resources, our access, professional development, obviously. And looking at what we need in terms of our curriculum and our instruction, how are we going to instruct their students? Again, adherence to the new guidelines, the new normals. We plan to increase our parent communication. Definitely, that's really important to Mr. Nichols. So let's make sure that we do that. We do it with surveys, with focus groups, with however we need to do to make sure that the parents, the families, the community members are all on board and have a voice in this process. So we're going to continue to do that not only with technology, but then we're looking at 3 more surveys, one in June, July, August, different things that we're going to survey our families. Just look at the needs of our staff and our families, the safety practices and protocols, and continue to fine tune those. We've already looked at ways that we were getting rid of our rugs in our classrooms. We're looking at how we're going to utilize our nurse's office, because the two elementary schools, we need to calibrate that. And just integrating that SEL, not only for elementary, not only for kindergarten students, but all the way up to 12th grade, because those students need it as well. And then just relying on each other and making sure that we are, all the committees, it's nice that we're really strong, and we're talking with each other. So that's a process that's not going to stop just because we've got new guidance. Those are committees that are going to continue to go forward. So I want to thank Rob, Mr. Miller, and Dr. Pollard for leading this work, Mr. Nichols for also supporting it and being in the meetings and all that sort of stuff. And the next slide is just all people.
Well, and I want to say, this is the list of the 110 plus folks that are on it, but we're also getting ideas every day from every work group that we have, from bus drivers to teachers to, we're at Grab and Go today, my phone rang and it was Mr. Pollock, and I just knew something was broken, something was, because that's when Mr. Pollock calls you in the morning. And he said, my team and I were talking about what's a solution we could put in place that would, not only for this current situation, but moving forward, what if we found ways to remove touch points? So, okay, let's go with that. But they really have a license to be innovative and come back with ideas that are going to make a difference. And that's really been awesome.
There was one question that came through, and it's, if a parent has a question or issue to discuss regarding a topic in one of the 6 committees, how will they receive feedback from a parent?
They can email me, bbishop@weekendschools.org, and I can make sure that whoever needs that specific question, we will get the answer to that parent. So we're really responsive in that manner. So R. Miller or D. Pollard or B. Bishop.
So could we, and you may have already done this, so where this slide is will be on, I'm assuming it's going to be on our website and Facebook.
We could
We
add-
could add a little
Sure.
contact person for questions.
All three of those.
That'd be awesome.
We're also going to push out several opportunities for families to be engaged with us, food service, which Dr. Bishop mentioned, but also some focus group opportunities. I have a parent advisory group that I've worked with throughout the school year. We're working on putting another meeting together with this group. They provide a lot of great feedback. And so really trying to do that throughout as our plan evolves, making sure that we have our families every step of the way. But we can definitely add that contact page and kind of work with our families.
And also, along with a few of us, but also wanting to thank just each of our people who are running committees, Jody, Dana, Lisa, Amy Coyle, who's one of our nurses, and then also Sandy Ward, who's running the SEL committee. They're doing a great job.
So after every meeting, we meet as a whole team, so we really want to thank those members as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are now going to move into authorization of signatures in the absence of the division superintendent.
All right, I sure hope the division superintendent doesn't have to be absent, but in the event that he does, it is standard practice that we do have an authorization of signatures. So nothing has changed from last year. We have Hank Morheim and Cynthia Pitts who be authorized to sign in absence of the superintendent. So that'll come before you for action later on in the agenda. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about that.
Likewise, appointment of fiscal agents.
So similarly, this is something we do every year, so appointment of fiscal agents. So we will have our very own fiscal agent, Hank Morheim would be appointed for that duty. Once again, that's same practice as it was the year before.
And then student handbook, code of conduct. And this is the first reading.
First reading of this student handbook. This has been slightly updated from last year to this year. Much of the updates were already in place from the January 2019 model. Used a lot of those. from Model Guidance for Positive and Preventive Code of Conduct, including a tiered system of supports, which is basically this chart, which we updated. This will be the second year of that. So really have tried to figure out what are those prior to this guidance, roles of community partners, and also some beliefs of student, parent, family, just kind of weaving that through this document, including a PBIS type of support system. This year, the state has given us one more year. The model guidance has SBARs, which are student behavior administrative response, and those will be the codes, not for the following year, but for 21, 22, there'll be SBARs still for next year. It's still going to be this the DCD codes. So instead of muddying the water, we're going to stick with the DCD codes, and the following year we'll do student behavior administrative response codes. It'll be a little bit different. We'll do a crosswalk. We'll make sure that the administrators will be trained. And then, of course, this handbook will need to reflect the updated VSBA policies that we'll be reviewing in the 15th of this month. So when those are adopted, those will be placed within this document, and just to tighten that up. So if there's any questions with the student family handbook disciplinary code.
Really more of a, I think, and this is, I know this board has had some conversations both with parents and among ourselves. And I think the areas, and I just happen to have jotted them down, but I think the board members, if there are other ones that you think you want to bring forward, but there are things that I think when we look back over the last year or two, there was not consistent enforcement. And those areas were 13, which was smoking and tobacco possession, 22, which was
Portable
portable communication that does not disrupt the educational setting, 26, bullying, and 32, alcohol and drugs. And so I just think after talking with administrators in the schools, talking with parents, hearing what students have to say, these are areas that I see. Board members, is there any other area that you would want to add to that? Dress code? Okay.
I'd like to look at appeal of short-term suspension too, in terms of the admission of additional information during a review of a decision.
So the process related to.
Yes.
Okay.
So it sounds like, board members, any other?
Yeah, the only one that we had talked about previously was the portable electronic communication devices and the consistency on that policy and how we enforce that from the K through 12, because it looks like the policy that we have now is more of a blanket statement versus being more detail oriented, because there's a different set of rules for elementary versus middle school versus high school. How are we going to delineate some of those policies and some of that verbiage for the enforcement side of it?
I think another thing to consider outside of the rules and the implementation of it, but if we venture into more of a virtual world, and that may be our reality in the fall, we'll see the application of rules and breaking rules, and it brings a little more gray area that I think we just need to have administrators, maybe not for the board, but for administrators working group to think about what are those components and how do we educate kids and teachers and so forth.
Yeah, maybe we should consider a provision in the handbook based on whether it's now or in the future, some sort of pandemic, that it gives us the option to change the policies based on pandemics because I'll just go back to electronic devices. It's how teachers use a computer virtually and how students use it at their homes versus they use it on campus. Do we have a different policy for that? Can they transmit things that we can't monitor
You mean to other students?
to other students? Can they have discussions between other students? And, whether it's through their cell phone device that they could be using to communicate with, that we can't monitor.
And I think that goes back to Mr. Little's point in his, in the remote learning about consistency of communication, to not have, if we have, here's a district adopted communication package. If you go outside of that, it's very easy for us to.
Yeah, because there's a different level of accountability. Right?
Correct, yes, versus this is how we communicate, this is the tool that we utilize in this person.
I mean, in general, and some, I think we're saying that we've got this student and family handbook, and we just highlighted some areas that we know there were parent complaints, concerns, and we wanna pass those on. We just don't want, now granted, we've got so many crazy things going on that I don't, this is probably takes a second seat to the committees and the opening of school and everything. But one day, hopefully, we will be back to normal, and I hope that we'll be able to continue to talk about this, or to make sure that those things are being addressed, and particularly the process piece that Sarah's talking about. So it could be that during a work session, we could just talk about it. We could bring up the frequent flyers. I do think we want to look at the data to see what our numbers look like. But again, it's second to getting open and trying to get back to normal, but to be continued.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Policy JN, student fees, fines, charges, first reading. Moreheim.
Madam Chair, board members, just one small change, and it's really not anything that's changing, it's just to be consistent with what Mr. Siak is starting for the athletic passes. We've updated that to $40 per student and $60 per adult, and that is the only change at this time.
So we're taking out the Trojan 100 altogether?
I don't believe that's something that we're currently doing. And that, my understanding is that was actually last year's practice, so we're just formally updating that in this document to make sure it matches what we're actually doing.
And these just, goes without saying, but these student fees, fines, and charges are under the assumption of a typical school year. Because that's what we're operating under at this point. There may be some revisions we have to come back to the table and look at, and there would obviously be some things that wouldn't apply, maybe some other things that would apply moving forward with our return to work.
Just a quick question is that one of the things when I read the policy, and I guess I just wasn't aware of, is there, because I know it's different for elementary, middle, and high school, but if you have multiple siblings within the school system that are paying similar fees, are there any discounts associated with having multiple siblings within the school system?
We don't have discounts, but we do offer payment plans, if families have difficulties in paying everything at one time. So we do try to work individually with parents, and do have those options available.
Any other questions or comments? Oops. Okay,
And that'll come back to you for approval at the 15th meeting, so you do have additional time on that, should you choose.
okay. And
Ms. Smith is gonna come up, and just quickly before she comes up, I just want to thank her and her staff. They're unbelievable, especially during this time. They've really shown a lot of care and thought in what they're doing. We actually had Prince George staff come out to our site this morning and visit with Leslie and her team to see kind of what they were doing. And I just want to say that we're very proud of her and very happy to have her here in Newkent.
And I sit on a lot of regional meetings where they talk about having difficulty having people come to do meal service. Every Monday, not only are they excited to be there, but they do such a tremendous job, and the energy is awesome. Doesn't matter what Monday it is, this is week 11 or 12 or so. From the moment schools closed,
That's right,
Leslie took over.
that following Monday, or
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah, by that Tuesday, we were rolling with thousands of meals, and it's been running it ever since. And we'll do it through June. She's working on the summer feeding program as well. So just I cannot thank her enough for the work she does. And she actually puts up with a lot of us every Monday too, hanging around trying to help and end up getting in the way. But
Well, I'm very grateful for all the support from everybody here in the audience here, and I have amazing staff. There's been no issues about coming to work, there's been no issues with doing what we need to do. And I know there've been many other districts that have had problems with staff coming to work. And then the good news is. Okay, next one. So we would have had really good news this year. We were definitely going up in sales and the numbers were flying through and we were gonna look really fantastic on this June. However, we'll go one more. Then COVID happened, and when it did, I was thinking we were gonna be 90 to 100,000 in the positive. I have a new dish machine I wanted to buy. And as you may remember, we are self-funded. We really receive very little bit of money from the federal government, only for free students. And being only 20% free and reduced, it's not a whole lot of money. We rely heavily on our paid students, and we actually feed more paid students than we do even our free and reduced kids. Not sure why, but that tends to happen. And so right now, we're looking at a loss of 42,000. However, in June, because we are doing these meals, and as long as we can continue them through June, I'm thinking we might actually break even. Yay! So not as good
just
as-
to put it in perspective, to break even when we really stopped selling in March is, it's not, when I said that at my regional meetings, I think they immediately made me leave the Zoom meeting because they're dealing with such deficits when it comes to food service. And many deal with it in a regular year, much less a year that's short like this. It's just a testament to the creativity and the forethought that Leslie and her team put into this.
And it was definitely team effort. It wasn't my decision, my thoughts, management coming together as a team. And then we've been talking to the staff on a regular basis, and it's just been a very, very positive overall effect. And to give you an idea, so we've been doing 380 meals a week for people, and they receive 7 breakfasts, 7 lunch, and they're good for the week. Well, normally we do like equivalent to 1,600 meals every single day. So 300, 1,600, and then we do lots of in a la carte, and that's really where we make our money. So it hurt. So, and then next slide, please. And then yearly, I know those of you that have seen me every year, you know that we always we have this tool called the PLE tool, and we're required to run through it. And this year we're required to go up 10 cents. However, I'm suggesting that we go up a quarter so that the following year we don't have to go up again. I talked to my staff, and a lot of them are parents as well as employees, and they felt that nickel and diming every year is more painful than let's do it's 15 cents for elementary, it's a quarter for middle and high. The reason high is always been more is they get extra fruit, but they also get larger entree servings. The quality of food is much better. It's more of a Chick-fil-A versus the McDonald's chicken nuggets. I like to use that as a great reference. And so that is why the prices are what we're hoping for the school board to approve. And here's an example as a picture.
This is Marissa, our high school manager, pushing in meals into the freezer. So we individually bag every breakfast and lunch. We even made spaghetti, put it in cups that the kids can put it in the microwave. And then you take your big bag and you put one for each breakfast, one for each lunch. You tie it up. That's one bag. And then you do 21 pieces of fruit and vegetables. We did French fries and mashed potatoes and corn and broccoli and anything you can imagine, fruit. Put it in a bag, and that's one bag. And then we do 14 milk, 7 chocolate, 7 white. We actually sell more chocolate in a normal day, so we decided we were gonna split it. And they get white milk for whatever they wanna do, and chocolate, that's what they prefer to drink. You know, and we've had people actually ask for more chocolate, but, and so they get 3 great big bags per each child. It's definitely been an interesting process. Any questions? Excellent. I do really have an awesome group.
I mean, I think to be continued will be once we know what the fall is like, what will things look like. I mean, how will it, I mean, I don't even know what questions to ask right now about it, to be honest.
Well, it's, for lunch, they talked about eating in the classroom. I really recommend that. For starters, I don't see a child sitting in one chair for the whole time. So it would be nice if the whole class could come up, walk down the hallway, and then we time it. So we have classes coming and going, you know, on a regular basis. I have bought shields, I have thermometers, we have masks. We have everything that we need to do in place. We can do the social distancing. It gives us a chance to actually have kids pick and choose, so there'll be less food waste. Trash cans will be filled with things they don't want. And then we can also work still on our à la carte, which is really why we've been able to, in the, you know, had this year been normal, I would have been strongly thinking of replacing my 50-year dish machine at the middle school. They have to make parts for it because they're no longer able to buy parts for it. It's time to replace it.
I do want to make a point, because we have a number of participants watching, that even though school is ending, technically from a calendar standpoint, grab and go meals will continue on Mondays, 9 to 1 right now through June 30th, with more information to come. I talked to a number of families, said, is this the last week? No, it's not the last week. We still want to see you. We still want you to come through. And it is for all families, all students in UK, not necessarily free reduced. All families welcome. Come through, have a good time. Get some
We have
breakfast.
lots of food to still empty out our freezer, so we'd love to pick up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And this will come before you once again on June 15th.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, Mr. Miller, you're going to talk to us about federal program applications.
Yes. So. One moment. Let me get rid of this on y'all's screen so you can see it. All right. So every year, come before you in June to go over our federal grants for the year for some of our federal grants. And so have 5 grants I'm going to go over today. This is one more than we have done in the past. I'll explain that when we get to the new one. So we currently, every year, we take part in, or in the past, we take part in Title 1 through 4. And so I'll go over those briefly. Our preliminary allocation for Title 1 was the first one, $256,484.56. This goes to, we use it to pay 3 teachers and then do parent engagement activities. We used it this year to do 1 division, 1 book, is where we've sent home books to families, and then we've had some online activities where different staff members have read those so that parents and students can read along, and we've also just had different activities to encourage parents to read with their kids. With that, and then at the individual schools, each school has parent engagement activities that they do. in the evenings. And so this Title I supports that as well. And then lastly, we use it for classroom intervention materials also. And you'll see most of this is literacy based. Jody Bailey helps a lot with Title I, and so she helped me piece this together as well, the grant for this year. And I don't know if you want to wait till the end for questions or just at any point, feel free to jump into them. And this is just first reading tonight, so we'll come back on the 15th. So then Title II, and Title II is supporting effective instruction. We get $54,594.29. These are all preliminary. We'll get final allocations around October is when we're told that. And so we pay partial salary for one teacher. Then we do Title II is a lot about professional development and hiring and retaining effective teachers. So we use it for tuition assistance for teachers. We also use it for our mentor program. We pay stipends for our mentors. We do our summer professional development during pre-service days. We use it for stipends for people to prepare for that and also to bring them back before their contract date starts. And then also professional development materials through the year, like for books for teachers and things like that when they're learning, as well as STEAM materials that are needed for professional development during the year. Title III is language instruction for English learners and immigrants, and we get just under 3,000 for that. We have a small population, and so one of the things that we don't have is a program similar to IB Online and Eversped. For ELS, they require a lot of the same exact things that go for special education. And so we use our Title III grant to purchase that. And to purchase a program that allows us to track data, track their plans, develop the plans, all of that for teachers and to help them. Then Title IV, this was new a couple years ago, and it's this sort of weird, ambiguous grant in my opinion. It has 3 buckets of money, or 3 buckets you can put your money into. One is well-rounded education for students. Another one is safe and healthy environment. And the last one is technology. We've used it in the past for college career planning and then also for STEAM activities. This year, we really wanted to tailor it for what we're going through right now and for what our students are going to be returning to in the fall. And so we listened to the SEL committee, we talked with them some, and we have sort of morphed it into a fund to help us with some of that professional development for social emotional development. We also talked, right now we have some money in there for if we need to contract out counseling services and bring in outside counselors to work with some of our students and or teachers. Then one of the things that we were talking about is the need to really streamline our school counseling program and look at how things making sure that we're providing counseling in the right way and in the right amounts. And so we've been looking at software that will allow us to teach school counselors to track their time and what types of meetings they're having with kids. And then it will give us data back on, okay, so this is how they've been meeting with, what they've been going over, how can we now manipulate that to get it to where we need it to be, if it's not already there. And then lastly, we have some money in there, continuing with that STEAM, just trying to keep going with that, some professional development and some PD materials. The last grant, which is quite interesting when it came to us just an odd way, is Title VI-A. Back in January, I think, Mr. Nichols was invited by some of the local tribes to come and talk about this grant. Currently, I believe only 1 or 2 other divisions in the state of Virginia apply for this grant. And so you have to have a certain population of Native Americans in your schools, and you have to have at least 10, and we do. And so they had actually reached out and said, would y'all consider applying for this? And so we looked at it, we went ahead and applied, and we did the preliminary application, which tells us how much you get. And so once I put in our numbers and all that, it came out to be $4,000. And so I met with And Mr. Nichols and I met last week with some of the tribal parents and talked through what would they like to see. And because that's one of the parts of the grants is really working with the tribe and seeing how can we help them. And one of the big ones that I was excited about, and they were excited about, was building awareness of tribal history, culture, and language. And so there, we're talking through how do we do like an after-school program throughout the year where we bring in some tribal elders and work with their children on just building their children's understanding of their own history and culture. And then, unfortunately, one of the things that came up in there was their language is we were meeting with Chickahominy, the Chickahominy tribe, their language is a dead language. So mostly, if they're speaking Native American, it is an Algonquin. And so we still talked about could we strengthen that some. And so we're looking at that. Supporting family literacy was another one that they really were interested in. And so similar to our One Division, One Book, we're looking at how can we do that across, we have students who are K-12. So how can we do that more K-12, but also working with the families on programs to get them reading and get parents reading with kids. And then promoting school readiness was the last area that they really identified. We really want some help with preschool and understanding how do we get our kids ready for the kindergarten. And so we talked through working with kindergarten preschool teachers that we have in Lincoln Elementary School and Watkins to work with them on these are the skills your children need, and here's ways that you can make that happen. So the funds will be used for some for paying tribal elders to come in and do some after school stuff, and then some for buying books for family literacy, and some to pay staff to stay after and lead some of these parent nights where they do over school readiness. Any questions on any of that?
Yeah, I can just speak to that particularly since my granddaughter is 50% Native American. It's, and even in Charles City where obviously it's a much higher population, one of the things that they used to do is they would have Indian school. You would go there every Saturday morning to learn the culture. And that school no longer exists. And so we'll go back to Ms. Stewart, Jessie Stewart, who's 100% Native American. And so she teaches the younger, like how to do tribal dancing, how do you do that, and things of that. And so I think it's real imperative that when you have qualified people like that, that's how you build the tribal history. And I think it's a great opportunity for our communities between New Kent and Charles City to take advantage of something like that.
Yeah, it's not for us to expand in that way this year.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
That's great.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity for us.
Definitely see this as a great.
Well, especially now that Chickahominy and these other things are federally recognized. And because as they become more federally recognized, it's going to provide more opportunities for our school system for scholarships and things of that nature as well.
And that's really what started this process, the recognition of the 5 tribes, and then us being able to apply based on that recognition and work with the Chickahominy tribe specifically. It's exciting.
Well, if you have any questions on any of the grants between now and the 15th or whatever, please reach out. You know.
Okay, so all of the presentations that we just had, all of them tonight were first reads.
They're all first reads. The full grant applications are all in there as well. And so there's like 200 some pages in there. Feel free to read it.
Everyone should read it at least once.
Yeah.
At least once. Okay, we are gonna move into old business. It's the superintendent's approved 2021 budget.
Absolutely. So once again, we're here to bring the budget before you. At our last meeting, you did approve the FY 2021 budget. The county has since adopted their budget, which of course includes our budget. No changes were made to funding, no changes were made to any of the pots that we had in there. So tonight, it really comes back to you. You've approved it, and now it's before you for adoption. So if you have any budget questions related to any of the presentations we've done this year, be happy to answer those for you at this time. So we did see a reduction of 200,000+ from the state. We saw a reduction of about $500,000 from the county, and then also looking to offset some sales tax decreases moving forward, so.
Do we think though, and I know our conversation was, is that if things improve, can we ask or can they allocate more money halfway through the year for certain things that were cut off because of the COVID-19 and the lack of funded positions and things of that nature as well?
So the sales tax would come directly to us, but the county has said as revenue increases, they will look at it for initiatives. So we are a subset of that, so I would be advocating for adding some of our initiatives back as well. So we'll look on our side, on the sales tax side of things and lottery proceeds as that rebounds, and I sure hope it does quickly. We'll look at coming before the board talking about now we have an opportunity, we could move forward in this arena, and also with the county as county revenue increases. So absolutely, great question.
Any other questions? If not, because we are approaching the action items, I'm actually gonna use that, what you just presented, because it makes a lot of sense. Do I hear a motion to adopt the FY 2021 approved budget as presented?
Make a motion, we adopt the budget as presented, 2021 budget.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no one's opposed, motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve the appointment of fiscal agents as presented?
I move we approve the fiscal agents as presented.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no opposed, motion carries. The last item, do I hear a motion to approve the
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I said I would start to slow down and I didn't, so
You
please,
got a roll.
please vote because you are entitled to do so. Do I hear a motion to approve the authorization of signatures in the absence of Mr. Nichols as presented? All in favor?
I move we approve.
True.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Do I hear a motion? Do I hear a second?
I second.
Thank you very much. Now, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Upcoming meetings, sir.
We have a work session on June 15th. So that is our next upcoming meeting. We'll also talk about our calendar for the next school year and those upcoming meetings. So June 15th is the last meeting, scheduled meeting for this school year. And we'll talk about calendars.
And then we'll have some updates, I think, for redistricting as well.
Yes, so redistricting committee is scheduled to meet, I believe, June 16th.
Okay.
But yes, we're moving forward with that. We had the public information session last month, so this is the next piece. It's on June 16th. I have a meeting with our redistricting consultant this week to talk about next steps and options. So yes, that continues to move forward.
If there are no other topics, then the meeting is adjourned.